I hope wherever you are, whoever you have gotten the meat of it and that you feel stronger to face a new day. I want to, in my Word to the Wise segment, I want to also walk back a bit. I want us to walk back to 2020. 2020, June of 2020 is when we begin hearing. From 2019, we heard there was a virus in China, in Wuhan, China, and wasn't sure what it is. By June of 2020, something came over the entire world. And what was happening was people were dying in large numbers. We had the situation of mass graves, where people went into the hospital and the family never saw them again. Not even the body was returned to them. We had a situation where the Italian prime minister, he was on television all across the world crying because Italy was being hit hard. People were just dying. And they came up with one of these COVID diseases. The center was seen in COVID in the year 2019, the COVID-19. And we had ships. The American had their hospital ships stopping at ports all over the Western Hemisphere here and taking care of people. We had in New York, Governor Cuomo, almost every day, he's on the radio, on the television, having these long interviews where playgrounds were being used as makeshift morgues. People were dying by the thousand. And that happened. Even in Trinidad, I can still remember the scene of seeing buses going up to Balandra to quarantine people. I know these things I'm saying is pretty familiar to all of us, but I think it's not familiar enough. We had the issues of cruise ship. One cruise ship out there in Florida have to stay off the coast because people on board were afflicted with COVID-19. It was one of the darkest days. People begin to remember the Spanish flu and what happened. They saw it as a pandemic of sort, and people were dying every single hour. What changed? Why is that happening now? What has happened? Did the food evaporated? What has happened? What changed? What place was locked down every which way? What has changed? In November of 2020, Pfizer and Moderna began to ask for the right to have an emergency vaccine. And then came the Sinopharm people, and then came those folks at Oxford, and then vaccination began to take place all over the world. And the rich countries began hoarding their vaccine as they vaccinate their people. And those vaccination rose to 50% and 60% and 70%, in some places 80%. While the vaccination was happening, what did we see? Now, I love dealing with facts. I pride myself as a researcher who loves statistics. What was happening? While the vaccination was going on, what we saw a corresponding fall in deaths and hospitalization, to the point where people begin to open up their society, to the point where even in Trinidad, mask wearing is no longer the law. What happened in 2020 and what is happening in 2022? It was not done because of natural medicine, because of New Start, because of all the things that you say. I want those who are listening to me, because I would have thought 3 years later, common sense would have returned to almost everyone. But I recognize common sense is not as common as we think. So those who are listening to me, I want you to ask yourself why we have been able to open up our society. Why we are no longer having playgrounds being used as morgues? Why we are not having containers as makeshift morgues? Why we are not having mass burial anymore? Why we are not seeing leaders crying on television? Why societies and countries have opened up their business? And why is that so? I really want you to ask yourself why that's so. I don't want to say it anymore, because people are still sending conspiracy videos around and are part of a consensus chat and all sorts of craziness. I just want you to ask yourself some subtle questions. What happened in 2020? Why it is not happening today? Search and ask, and don't give question based on your feeling. Try to be statistical with your answers. Why it is not happening today? A word to the wise is sufficient. So before I bring on my guest, I want to say last week, one of the young ladies called the program, and she said 99% of your supporters are women. Why is that so? And she went on to answer the question. A young man called me and he said, I should have corrected the lady. It is not 99%. Right? I can't correct the lady. The lady is 99%. When people speak like that, there's a colloquial meaning, so many. I think that's what she meant. She didn't go counting who was it and who not to arrive at a statistical number. I feel she was simply using a colloquial phrase, 99%, meaning so many. And she was right. This program has been here for 20 years. And I must say, women has been in the forefront, of the support for this program. If all the men who support this program stop supporting the program will still go on. Challenge, yes, but it will still go on. But I can say to you, if all the women who are supporting this program stop supporting the program will cease to exist. So I can correct the lady. Men are big on promises. Most of the promises I have that they'll do it, they're looking at it, they're working on it, are men promises. Most of the giving for the program to keep this program on air are women who are doing it. They are the ones who do it. This program is here mainly because of the women. So I can correct her. I know she was speaking in a sort of general colloquial sense that there's so many, only women, and she was right about that. I could ask by course of women named the women are the ones who are making it happen for us, and I'm thankful for them dearly. The men will come in, they come in one cocoa, but for most part, men give a lot of promises. But this morning we have a woman again. I said all of that to say we have a young woman this morning who is here to tell us about budgeting and digital economy. And she's going to do it from two aspects. She's going to do that budgeting that some of you may tune into, maybe the flyer said to you, that is what's going to happen. But she's also an evangelist too. So she will also give in that digital aspect from a prophetic and a historical point of view. So good morning, Rhonda Reid-Hylegar. Rhonda, good morning and welcome to Victorious Lifestyle.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Pastor Brown. Good morning to listeners. Good morning to the viewers. It's a pleasure to be on today. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh no, the pleasure is mine, man. I know you're going to do this show some justice this morning. I can confidently say that.
By the grace of God.
You want to say something about yourself? You want to say something about yourself?
People usually ask me to talk about myself, which I like to describe myself as a simple woman being used by God for a very unique ministry, right? I deal with money with regard especially to end time prophecies. Yes, I have formal training, formal certification. I do have degrees, right? Even in the financial planning from the Canadian Financial Planners Association. I used to lecture at UWI-Tech in the field of financial planning, right? I lectured in areas of financial planning, fundamentals, tax, wealth management, retirement, you name it. I was also the subject head and coordinator there. I have done training for the Institute of Bankers Association. I've been a tutor for their certification program as well. But at the end of the day, right, what I am sharing with you is what God has taught me, right? It has not come from the schools. It has not come from the colleges or universities. So I really, I'm humbled when God uses me or when I'm asked to do things like this. And I look forward to it, right? So just a simple woman being used by God for a very unique ministry.
Thank you very, very much. So let's get right into the meat of what's happening here.
Yes.
No, I know there are folks that are listening who have seen the flyer, who have seen budgeting, and they will ask themselves in this age of high cost of living, what advice can you give to them to really cope with this rising cost of living? And it's a worldwide phenomenon. Eh?
Yes.
I want folks to know that. So what advice can you give to them here in Trinidad? And maybe someone on the web when you're listening and what advice can you give?
Okay, sure. But let me just say a word of prayer before I start. All right. Sure. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this privilege, Lord. It is so humbling. Father, I ask for your Holy Spirit right now. I ask that you would, let me decrease so that you can increase. And I pray that, as I answer the questions, as I speak, Lord, for those who are listening and viewing, that not only would information be imparted, but that lives could be changed and that more than anything, you could be glorified. So be with me as I go through this presentation in Jesus' name, amen. It is really a difficult time now in the country. We are seeing cost of living increasing over and over and over, and it is not going to go down. Things are not going to get better, right? So one of the things I would like to recommend to people, first of all, and I'm talking to Christians now, is that there's two biblical principles that if we hold to these principles, it will help us a whole lot as we navigate the rising cost of living, the lowering of our incomes, right? And those two principles, one is found in Philippians 4, verses 11 to 13, talking about being content whatever your circumstances. It talks to us about living within our means. Right? Sometimes we have a lot, sometimes circumstances change and we have a little. The whole idea is to be content, whatever the circumstance, and live within our means. And the second, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and the second principle is to practice economy. Be frugal. We saw this, and this is in John 6, verses 12 and 13. We saw, even with Jesus, when he was feeding, the multitudes with the loaves and fishes, it says that afterwards he told the disciples, gather up the fragments. And with those fragments, they ended up with more than they started with. They ended up with baskets. Sometimes we underestimate the little things. We figure, throw this out, throw that out, just a little bit. But the little bit, as the saying goes, drop fills the bucket, right? So if we practice, those two principles, the principle of contentment and living within our means, as well as the principle of practicing economy, right? We can navigate the circumstances. You know why? Because we have God on our side. As faithful stewards, he has promised us that we will not lack, that he will provide everything that we need. We do our part, we give him all authority to do his part.
Great. The old folks say one cocoa for the basket.
No. One cocoa. Oh, I'm not dropped up for water.
No, do you have any practical tips you can share with us now as we continue this discussion? And right. Alex, welcome to be with us this morning. Thank you.
Now the thing is, before you can grow financially, you must have less than you earn. You must spend less than you earn, right? The only way you could spend $120 if you have $100 is if you borrow 20. And once you borrow, you end up in a spiral that only takes you downward, right? So we have to learn to live within our means. So the practical tip would be, first of all, look at what your current level of spending is. Look at your income, look at your expenditure, and determine whether you have a surplus or a deficit. So, you look at income, you minus your expenditure. A surplus means that you actually spend less than you earn, which is a good thing. A deficit means that you are spending more than you are earning. Now, you'd be surprised as to how many people actually spend more than they earn without even realizing it. Simply because a lot of us use things like credit cards, not recognizing that they are in fact loans from the bank, right? So we look at it and we see how it is. And even if we do have a surplus, we could aim to improve it. But certainly, if we have a deficit, we must correct that because we will not be able to grow within, to be able to grow financially. And we are keeping the principles in mind of contentment as well as living within, living within our means. So one of the things you can do, you can't control your salary from your employer, but you can look at things of ways of increasing your income, such as little side hustles. There are people who do things like, you do tutoring and you do little baking and you do, graphic design, anything that you could use your skills for, you can earn some extra income. If you don't have any skill sets, there are numerous courses available online, many of them free of charge. Learn something that you can develop a skill that can earn you money, and not only earn you money, but can also decrease your expenditure level, right? There are two areas that I want to point out in particular that send people off of their budget a whole lot. One is the area of irregular expenses. When I say irregular expenses, these are the ones that don't show up every month. They come ever so often. Things like house insurance, car insurance, repairs, medical, These things, when they do come, and they tend to be pretty high. Most people aren't prepared for them, and so they tend to borrow, which again is putting you in a situation where you could end up in a deficit. What I would recommend is put aside money every month for these items. So if on average every year you spend about, and I'm just saying, $6,000 or $10,000 it repairs to your vehicle and maintenance and so, put aside some every month so that when that expense comes, you borrow from yourself. It's a revolving fund. You put in every month and you borrow or take out every month when you have that expense. That is one area that helps people stay within their budget in a very big way. Another area is in the area of food, right? I encourage everyone to start a kitchen garden. You may not have space. If you have a backyard, find a porch, a balcony, anywhere. Use whatever you have. Use containers, plastic containers, buckets, flower pots, plant pots. The thing is, you want to be able to cut your food bill. Because as we will see a little later when I talk about the digital economy, when our supply chains are cut, prices go up astronomically. Right? So not only will you be cutting costs, you will also be getting healthier food, you'll be getting exercise in the fresh air and the sun, you start there as well, right? So as far as possible, prepare your meals at home. You want to team up with others, buy in bulk, right? Look for lower priced brands. And, you want to even though things might be difficult, don't forget those who are less fortunate and who are in need, share with others. And the last tip I will give is about giving. You see, sometimes when things are difficult, we tend to cut back on our giving. And that's the one mistake we don't want to make. We need to keep returning our tithe, and we need to keep giving our love offering, because we need God. Without God, we're not going to make it through this, right? So as faithful stewards, we claim the promise in Malachi that to bring the tithes into the storehouse and prove him now. And brethren, we need to start proving God. If we don't prove him now, we will not prove him when there are trials and things are ahead. So I encourage everyone, keep being faithful, prove God. And as that faith grows day by day, when the problems come, we are so sure our God is going to take care of us. We will have no challenge.
What about Rhonda, where we have an extreme case? We are given a time where people are losing their jobs and people are coming down with terminal illnesses and things like that. How do you manage in a situation like those?
Now that is really,
that question right?
Yeah, that is really, really difficult. And this is where we have to start thinking outside the box, right? In cases like this, what I would recommend firstly is that families sit together and first of all, sit and chat, talk it out, right? Because for this to work, when you have difficult situations like that need difficult decisions, families have to be together. So I would say, Sit together, even with the children. We underestimate children's ability to understand sometimes. Explain the situation and get everybody on board. Now, it may mean making some drastic changes, such as you may have to move in with a family member, right? You may not be able to afford rent anymore or mortgage anymore. You may have to now look at ways of exchanging what I call bartering, exchanging goods and services without cash. So for example, if you can paint, you paint my fence, I service your car, whatever skills and talents you have, we link up with people and we do things without money. Monetize your skills and start doing things for yourself. Again, the whole idea would be about reusing rather than repairing. We're talking about using rather than repairing and replacing things rather than, now I'm saying it all wrong. Reusing rather than replacing and repairing rather than discarding, right? So the whole thing is to change. And this is where we need God. This is where we need, for God to give us the strength. But as a family unit, it is all possible, right? But it would require some really hard decisions.
Okay.
And out of the box thinking.
Okay, I want to switch gear. Do you see the rising cost of living leading to a recession? No, it's a recession. If you have anyway, I'm here to you. And is there a link between a recession and the digital economy?
Okay. Yes, and yes, right? Now, in June of this year, the World Bank said, and I just want to check and make sure I want to quote them correctly, so I'm just going to read it. They said most countries in the world were headed for a recession. And just 2 weeks ago, it said that a global recession is imminent. And if we're talking about a global recession, of course, that includes Trinidad. So what that means is that we right now have to watch our spending and we have to start building up our cash reserves, right? Now, in a recession, it usually means that everything slows down. Spending slows down, but production slows down, and the economy basically grinds to a halt. Jobs are lost, and that's one of the main things now. Because nothing is happening much in the economy, jobs are lost. So we need to start building up our cash reserves, focus more on our needs rather than our wants, and start to build an emergency fund. And if we are in debt, of course, to try to accelerate the payments. That's, of course, talking about the rise of cost of living linked to recession. But now we link between the recession and the digital economy. Now, that is an absolute yes. And the Bible shows us clearly how that can happen. Now, we're going to be looking at a passage. This is a passage in Genesis 47, 13 to 25. It's a long passage. I'm going to try my best to praise it as much as possible. It's about Joseph in Egypt during the time of the famine. So there was the famine in Egypt, right? And I'm looking at verses 13 to 25. There was no bread, there was famine, severe shortage in the world. With that shortage throughout Egypt, right? And if shortage was in the world, it was not just Egypt, it was Egypt and Canaan. The price of food, of course, would have soared. The people spent all their money on food, and that food was controlled by Pharaoh or controlled by the government. So the end result was that the government ended up controlling all of the money, right? The Bible actually says Joseph gathered all the money and brought the money into Pharaoh's house. But then the money failed in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan. So the money could no longer purchase the food, either because they had used up all of the resources or because maybe inflation or hyperinflation had rendered the money worthless. Either way, the monetary system in use at that time had collapsed. So after the money failed, the Egyptians gave their cattle to be able to purchase food. This is in verse 16. Now, this is the equivalent of us giving our real asset investments. So you find that by the end of the first year of the famine, citizens would have lost their money, they would have lost their jobs, and they would have lost their real assets to the government. Now, that is a recession. By verse 18, we said famine had entered its second year. And with the money and assets gone, the Egyptians were desperate enough to plead with the state to buy us and our land for bread. In other words, this is where it started to hit home. Their fixed assets now, their houses and their lands, their very beings were offered up. They became totally dependent on the state for their very survival, and the state now owned everything and everyone. And this was only the second year of the famine, right? They proposed that the state make work programs, which the state complied with. So that we find by the end of the chapter, or by the end of the passage, the land became Pharaoh's. He relocated the people off of the lands and into cities throughout Egypt. They worked the land, they were taxed 20%, and they were happy. Now, for Israel at that time, God's people, they were sojourning in the land of Egypt, and life was a blessing for them. They lived in Goshen, they had possessions, and they multiplied exceedingly. But unfortunately, it didn't stay that way, because Israel soon found themselves in bondage in the same land where they had found their prosperity. So what happened is that what started out as a famine in Egypt ended up with a new financial order, with a new economic system being introduced, where all the assets were controlled by the government and the citizens were dependent on the state. Now, is the world facing a looming food crisis? Yes, it is. Is Trinidad and Tobago looking at a looming food, an unfolding food crisis? Yes, it is. We are seeing it every day in the news. The Bible tells us that at the end of time, we are not going to be able to buy or sell unless we have the mark of the beast. And we're not talking about the mark of the beast now. We're talking about, this is Revelation 13:17. We're talking about the fact that no man might buy or sell. So the question is a new financial order emerging in our time? And we have to understand that to bring in a new financial system, the old financial system must be done away with. Would you agree with that? And to have a system where you can't buy or sell, the new system must be completely controlled by some authority. So can this happen in our lifetime? And the big question is it already happening?
But can you change a financial system so easy? Have and have principles that people who are there, and the financial system function on trust and stability, you know. So can you change that so easy?
But to understand that, we need to take a closer look at money, right? And the history of money. Very short. Simplified history of money would show that the financial system has already moved through several iterations. We had first a system of barter, as we spoke about just now. People traded directly with each other. We had easy to trade items like salt. We had coins, silver coins and gold coins. And now we have paper money, which started out as IOUs, where there was actually a certified amount saying that you would get gold in exchange for this paper. But now we have fiat currency, which is in use today. Our financial system is based on the Bretton Woods system, which was negotiated in 1944. All currencies are pegged to the US dollar. Now, the US dollar at that time was pegged to gold. When it ceased to be pegged to gold, it remained a monetary standard, with other currencies pegging their currencies to it based on a floating exchange rate. But at the time it became a fiat currency, it was not backed by any commodity, but instead, as a fiat currency, it was declared by decree from government to be legal tender, which is why governments could change, which is why we can very easily just change our cotton notes to polymer notes very easily. It's declared by decree. So it therefore means that central banks can now control how much fiat money is printed. And there's the danger that if too much is printed, it could lead to inflation or hyperinflation. And any extended period of high inflation can lead to a loss in the value of the currency, leading to, of course, recessions and depressions. Now, this happened before in Zimbabwe in 2007, 2008, and in Weimar, Germany between 1919 and 1923, where both of those currencies lost so much value that they actually had to be done away with and new currencies had to be issued. So we see that what we're seeing now is that most countries are grappling with very high levels of inflation. Some even have hyperinflation, and that spells big trouble. You see, because since before the start of the Ukraine and Russia war, prices were already increasing. We had oil prices 57% higher in 2020 in 2021 than in 2020, and that was before in 2020, in January 2022, than before 2021. Fertilizers were almost doubled in price. So when we look at these things, they are compounded by the war, right? Since Russia and Ukraine, between them, are the world's largest suppliers of oil and wheat. So very quickly, let's start with oil. Higher oil prices mean higher shipping prices internationally, higher gas prices locally, and higher prices for anything that has to be transported. Wheat is an indispensable item, a staple food in many countries. I mean, can you imagine living without flour in some form or fashion, whether it's bread, it's doubles, it's pies, it's pastries? With the supplies of wheat greatly reduced, the law of supply and demand steps in, taking the price to really astronomical levels. These two alone, without the other knock-off effects, can drive inflation to levels not seen in recent years. But there's something else. You see, Russia is also the world's largest supplier of fertilizer. And when the global supply of fertilizer is reduced, right, that will now cause skyrocketing prices, where farmers are now colloquially balling and reducing fertilizer use, reducing yields will be resulted, and prices are going to be rising even higher. So as items become scarce, global supply chains become uncertain, countries look for other suppliers. And we experienced that locally recently with national flour mills. They had to source flour, they had to source wheat from other suppliers. And while they did get it, it came at a much higher cost, 48% higher, which is why we had that huge rise in the price of flour recently. And it has only just begun. You see, inflation rates are escalating worldwide, even in the developed countries. And the result is that when people can't afford food, there end up being protests and riots. And as Winston Churchill said, you never let a good crisis go to waste. So what is the crisis? Rising social unrest over energy and food shortages, which threaten global stability. And as inflation keeps increasing in practically every country around the globe, citizens can buy less and less, their currencies become more and more worthless, and hence the international call for a great reset. More specifically, a great reset of the financial system, and their proposed solution is the CBDC, or the central bank digital currency, or the move to a cashless world. This, they claim, will help the more vulnerable in society.
What is exactly the central bank digital currency? And what is the difference between being cashless and the digital currency?
Okay. Now, it's so ironic, but the World Bank is saying, first of all, that they need to go this way, this cashless way, to help the vulnerable. Why? Because the vulnerable in many of the developing countries, they are not registered in their countries, so therefore they don't have access to social support, and also they are unbanked. So therefore, even if they were to get social support, they can't get the checks. So the World Bank has this new project, but it's not new, it started in 2016, this digital ID project, which is about creating a digital ID for every person in the world, and to be able to access any public sector or private sector service in the country, you must have this unique digital identifier. So cashless, when we talk about being cashless, it means conducting business and transactions without cash, using digital money. So it's where you go online, and we do it already. You go online, you do online banking, you use your Links card, you use your credit card. All of that is cashless banking. Digital money refers to any payment that is purely in the electronic form. It is not tangible like a dollar bill, and it is exchanged using technology. So you use smartphone technology, credit card technology, and online cryptocurrency technology. So that is digital. That is the digital currency. It's what we have in place now. It's what we're all using. In fact, just at the budget speech, we're boasting us to practically all the government agencies now are cashless, or practically cashless. You don't need cash. You could use your cards. But the difference now, when we talk about a central bank digital currency, that is a digital version of the country's fiat currency. So it's no longer just ones and zeros on a computer. It's the actual money being put in a digital form. So therefore, if whatever money you have, so you no longer have the tangible money. The tangible money is now exchanged for digital money, and the digital money alone exists. And the bigger issue though is that whereas now with our cashless society, we have accounts with banks and with other financial institutions. With a central bank digital currency, our accounts are going to be held with the central bank directly. We will not be going through the intermediate banks. So persons are going to have their accounts directly with the central bank. Now that has some serious concerns, right? The main ones are loss of privacy, as your spending can now be tracked, and of course, centralized control, because the government can conduct mass surveillance and quickly prevent people from buying anything and earning anything or selling anything. Now, should we be concerned? I'm going to just share 3 headlines from Canada, from the UK, and from the US about these CBDCs or these central bank digital currencies. In Canada, the headline said, a national digital currency has serious privacy implications, where it says the Bank of Canada aims to assert a new level of state surveillance in the digital economy. Imagine a government keeping tabs on everything that you purchase. In the UK, the headline said, the Bank of England tells ministers to intervene on digital currency programming, since digital cash could be programmed to ensure that it is only spent on essentials or on goods which an employer or government deems to be sensible. So I wonder if returning a tithe, giving an offering, or purchasing a Bible is considered sensible in the times of rising inflation. And in the US, the headline said, Biden is planning a new digital currency. Here's why you should be worried. And it went on to talk about it being traceable and programmable with various rules and restrictions built into the design, which can disallow users from spending too much on a particular product. So I wonder if as a Seventh-day Adventist, I will be cut off if I don't take the vaccine, if I don't keep their Green Sunday, or if I don't keep God's Sabbath. The fact is, if you are deemed a threat to the system, to the country, or to anyone, you can be cut off. You can't do anything. You can't travel. You can't fill your car with gas. You can't purchase groceries. You can't do anything. You can't buy or you can't sell. It will be a time when you can't do anything because you would not be able to access your central bank digital currency.
I want to take you back when you started with Revolution 13:17, when you said that one of the distinguishing features of the whole system of the mark of the beast is that you will not be able to buy or sell.
Yes.
So if I should follow what you are saying, then it becomes very clear that that can be done easily.
Yes.
And before, as a boy growing up, studying these prophecies, I always saw the issue of soldiers and army and battalions coming to your home and taking you away and stopping you from selling. But you are saying that these things can be happening in a very simplified way, in a very real way also.
Correct.
Isn't that what you say?
That's what I'm saying. And I can give you some proof if you didn't believe, right? Earlier this year, if you think it can't happen, and it can't happen in our time, earlier this year, there was something in Canada called the trucker protest. I don't know if anybody knows about it. In January of 2022, the government of Canada imposed a mandate to the truckers going through the Canada-US border that they had to be vaccinated. The truckers resisted and organized a massive convoy that met in Ottawa. In response, Prime Minister Trudeau invoked, for the first time ever in Canadian history, the Emergencies Act. It's somewhat similar to our state of emergency, right? But it gave the police sweeping powers to go after the finances of the protesters. And they began turning over the names of the organizers and of the people who actively blocked the roads. They gave the numbers of the trucks and the vehicles that were used in the blockade. And the police, right? This is what the police said in a statement. They said 219 financial products had been frozen, 253 Bitcoin addresses related to the protesters and the organizers were blocked, and one bank in particular had frozen 3.8 million Canadian dollars held by these people. Another article said that a total of 7.8 million had been frozen. What they did, according to Newsweek, they targeted any and everyone involved in the process, in the protest, even those people who were not directly there, but who were funding the truckers through GoFundMe. They froze their bank accounts. They canceled their credit cards. They targeted, as I said, the accounts of the people not directly involved. They blocked access to cash and cryptocurrency. They threatened to cancel insurance and they threatened to suspend corporate accounts. So they touched bank bank accounts, credit cards, cash, cryptocurrencies, insurance, business accounts. Now, how could they have done all of this?
All right.
They said it.
Rhonda, you just hold. You will continue. Alex, if there's anyone who is online who would like to interact with Reid-Hylegar, they can come in at this time. If there's anybody like that.
Okay, Shirley, let's say good morning and opening the phone lines at 622-4911 is the program Victorious Lifestyle with Pastor Brown, and a very interesting topic there by Rhonda. I appreciate it very much. I'm taking it in. So while we wait for the phone calls, we will hand it back to you guys, and I'll let you know when the call's coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Now, so the question was asked, how could they have done all of that? How could they have touched such a wide range of financial products? And they said it themselves, because they now had the tools to follow the money. Are those familiar words, by the way? Tools to follow the money. And the tool was this unique e-identifier, which is the center of the World Bank project. You see, that e-identifier connects you to everything. In the recent past in Trinidad, we saw the bank cards, whether the debit cards or the credit cards, being upgraded with the Visa logo. You recognize that? Even the debit cards now with the Visa logo. And most recently, even the UTC cards, meaning that they are now using that technology. We have seen upgrades of our driver's licenses, the national IDs. They now have barcodes, upgrades of the passport, taxation, healthcare, property tax. Everything is being upgraded and everything is being linked with this unique identifier. Now, while it might seem good for conducting business because it connects all of your dealings.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say, well, with all this digital, make life easier.
It's easy. Of course, it's easy, right? You go to one place and they hook up everything. You don't have to go from here to there to the other. But it can just as easily disconnect you from everything. Right? And that is why the articles that I read before from the UK, US, and Canada, that's why they express such alarm, because the CBDC would be linked to the central bank digital currency would be linked to this e-identity. And if there's any red flag associated with you, then you can be cut off from everything. And if you don't believe me, I want to quote, this is the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements. This is what he says. He says he is comparing cash and the central bank digital currency. He did this at a conference, I think in 2019 or 2020. He says, we don't know who is using a $100 bill today, and we don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. The key difference with the CBDC or with the central bank digital currency is the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that determine the use of that central bank liability, and will also have the technology to enforce it. So the reporters had a reason to be concerned, right? And like I say, if you have questions, stop me, but I'll continue until any such question comes in, right? Now, this is not...
Sorry. Let's take this call. Sorry to interrupt. Oh. Here we go. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Go right ahead.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to know, because under the Patrick Manning government, they passed a law where they could have go into anybody's account without their permission. I want to know if that was groundwork for these things coming in, because at least we know that the framework for the e-identification is not in place. But if you have the power to go into my account without my consent and it is legal, then they set the groundwork I've already set for them to know everything about our finances and whatnot, and also who don't know if they're tracking our finances, because they have the authority by law to do that based on whether they say you're suspicious or wherever it is. They don't need no actuality, and you wouldn't know what's going on in the background. So I don't know if you started to talk about the Visa chip and all these things. I don't know if the central bank will make a shift to whatever it is, but they put two persons, I think, in the the financial sector to digitalize everything. So I don't know, you speaking these things and it bringing up concerns to me that this thing is already afoot. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I can answer that very easily. I'm not sure as to what you're referring to with the Patrick Mann administration, but what I can tell you is what is happening now has its own rules. For example, what's going on in Trinidad? According to both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, the goal is for Trinidad to be able to be a cashless society, right? The aim was to have that every national should have an e-identity by the end of 2022. And furthermore, they were projecting that the pilot project for the CBDC would begin by the middle of 2022. Where are we? It was recently reported, and this would have been like about a week or two ago, that the unique identifier part is delayed a bit. It's still on target, but the reason it is delayed is because they are also trying to include the vaccine, the digital vaccine card into the whole mix with the e-identifier. But because of some inconsistencies with the information, it has to be fixed first. I don't know if you are aware, they're calling people to clarify information with the vaccine, right? But it is going forward, and it has been said that even if there's a change of administration, the project will be completed where every national will have an e-identifier, right? The date is still not quite certain. Regarding the pilot project, there is, in fact, a private company called POIs, which was contracted to begin testing on August 10th of 2022. And although it was not being called a pilot, the parameters for this company is the same parameters being used for testing of the CBDC, right? And in fact, that's what a lot of the countries are doing now. Even the US. The US is using private companies to do the testing. Their one is being called the Fed now. And once they put all the things in place, then the central bank just adopts it. So what is happening? It is happening in Trinidad, and it's progressing. We are a little behind the rest of the islands in that, in fact, our region is leading out. They said the Eastern Caribbean is the first currency union to launch CBDCs. Jamaica is the first nation to legalize CBDCs. This is called Jamdex. In the Eastern Caribbean, it's called Dcash. And the Bahamas, they said, is the pioneer of the new world economy with their CBDC. That's a question being asked. This is called the sand dollar. It's happening around the world. In fact, currently 112 currencies are exploring in some form, either they are testing or they're still doing research. They're all looking at these central bank digital currencies. It's happening, and it's happening rather quickly. So what we are seeing is that just as the monetary system of the past was done away with and reinvented, we are seeing a doing away with of our fiat currency and a reinvented with the CBDCs. And the CBDCs, or those central bank digital currencies, built into it, because it is linked directly with central bank, it inherently allows the central bank to monitor, to control, and to basically prevent you from doing anything with money, buying and selling included.
Do you see these things as intentionally done, or do you think that this is happening beyond the control of those who are doing it, but it will serve a prophetic purpose?
It's prophetically done, and it is. I mean, I don't know how many of the others. Okay, I'm guessing employees, some low-level employees, even employees in Trinidad may not know the ultimate, but there is someone who is driving this. This is not new. This has been started quite a while ago. But you know something? There's a text. There's not a text. There's a passage that says, "Those who place themselves under God's control to be led and guided by Him will catch the steady tread of events ordained by Him to take place." That's from the Testimonies, Volume 7. This is ordained by God to take place. This has to take place. If we have to reach the point of no buy, no sell, where there has to be that control, then we have to do away with cash, and we have to bring that system of control. So God is still in control. And the fact of the matter is, unlike the system of cash, which offered privacy, this new central bank digital currency allows for complete tracking and complete control, where the authorities can use the money itself to restrict our buying and selling. And, you know, it is possible, right? But we don't have to be afraid of. Okay. We know God is in control. We know that this is what was going to happen. We are told it's going to happen, but the fact is it may happen sooner than we expected. It took less than 2 years in the time of Joseph. What we need to do is to place it all in God's hands. That is why I was talking earlier about being faithful stewards and trusting God, because it's only God going to take us through that time when we can't buy and we can't sell, right? So what should we be doing? Well, we should be putting our financial affairs in order. Spending less than we are earning, getting out of debt, of course, being faithful with our tithe and offerings, focusing on needs, not wants, building an emergency fund, working with a spending plan. But if I have the time, there are four points.
We don't.
We don't. Okay. And we are good. But if I may just give the headings, I want to read the passage, but if I can give 4 headings of spiritual prophecy, it says, 1, money will soon depreciate. 2, she's recommending that we downsize. 3, she talks about country living. And 4, she talks about trusting God and praying for direction. We must always don't do anything willy-nilly. God will direct us as to what we do to get us through this. He is in control. He ordained this.
Okay. I want to thank Sister Rhonda this morning for her wide-ranging explanation. I know it was a blessing to me. I hope it was a blessing to you also. I want to thank you for listening. Alex, thank you very much for producing again this morning. And until we meet next week, I want to say God bless. And Rhonda, thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Blessings to everyone.
Thank you very much, guys. Have yourselves a wonderful week and stay blessed. The program Victorious Lifestyle every Sunday here on Talk